thank you so much for being willing to meet with us and take time out of your day to talk a little bit about your experience with the Technology Transfer Office. And we'd love it if you could just give us a quick introduction, a little bit about yourself, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Super. So I've been in the medical device space for for 40 years. I did my undergraduate work at the University of Texas at Austin, got my master's degree there, and I got my PhD at Marquette University in Milwaukee. I went to Harvard Business School, and I also took the patent bar exam, so I can prosecute patents with the patent office. I've been in medical devices the whole time. It got started when I was 11, 12 years old. My father was sick for about a year, in and out of in the hospital, and witnessing that, this is in the early 70s, witnessing that, it occurred to me that I needed to be somehow involved in medicine. Both my mother and my father were electrical engineers, so it was sort of decided I would be an electrical engineer, and so I just wanted to be involved in building medical devices to help patients and to help caregivers get through their day. And so I'm as fortunate as a person can be for being able to have done the thing that I wanted to do for a whole career. Not many people can say that. And the other thing that's nice is that from the time I'm, walking onto campus as a freshman, I knew what it was that I wanted to major in, what it was I wanted to study. The first job out of college was in this field, and so I've been able to do that. Briefly, I worked for an organization called ECRI. It used to stand for the Emergency Care Research Institute. It doesn't anymore, and it was sort of a consumer reports for medical devices. So, for instance, I would do a study on all of the patient monitors that were available for sale in the country, and evaluate them and write up a report so that hospitals could see which ones were good and which ones they should avoid. And then we also did forensic engineering, accident investigations. So, as a 25-year-old, they said, "Hey, you know something about patient monitors? There was a patient that died in a hospital in New Jersey. We think the monitors did an alarm, so why don't you drive out to New Jersey, test all of the equipment, interview all of the clinicians, figure out why the patient died, and then get yourself ready to be deposed in the inevitable lawsuit." And I, as a 25-year-old, it's like I had no business being involved in that, but they threw me into it, and it was fantastic. And I worked for a company called Marquette Electronics, which became Marquette Medical Systems, so electrophysiology patient monitoring company. We were acquired by GE Healthcare, and so between Marquette and GE, I commuted to the same campus of buildings for about 18 years. So I quit GE and looked for another job because I thought it's easier to look for a job when you're 45 than when you're 59. So I came to San Antonio, working for a wound therapy company, and then eventually left there. A colleague of mine had started, a former colleague of mine from KCI had started a startup and recruited me to come over there. And it seemed like it would be kind of like back to that ECRI days of having responsibility to do everything and being entrusted to do everything. And that's what the startup environment can provide. So there we are up to today.
So our first question is, we were curious about how you first heard of the Tech Transfer Office.
Okay, so I've worked with tech transfer offices at a handful of schools, UT Austin, and most notably University of Utah, your colleagues down the street, so to speak. And I always thought that it was a shortcut, a way of getting a hold of technology for a company sooner by finding out what other folks had been working on. The way that I found out about yours was through Professor Sommerfeld, who is on leave right now, I think. Do you know him? Do you know Scott Sommerfeld? Okay, he's applied physics and astronomy, and he was the dean of that school until recently, and then he went back to being a professor. Anyway, I got an introduction to him through another professor that we were working with at UT Austin. He said, "Hey, if you're doing something on this, the professor in Austin is a acoustics, mechanical engineering acoustics, and he says, if you're going to do something on active noise control, you really ought to meet Scott Sommerfeld. He's done as much work as anybody in the world has done on this." So I got to know Scott, and he, I would say he joined our team. We didn't, employ him, but he was a critical consultant that helped out enormously. And he is the named inventor on 5 patents that are assigned at least in part to BYU. And we were able to negotiate a license with BYU to get a hold of these, to get worldwide exclusive rights to this portfolio of patents around active noise control. And so if you're going to license technology from a university, you got to go to the tech transfer office.
So would you say that's like what really helped you be interested in working with the tech transfer office, was because of the product and also with Scott as well?
Well, yeah, it's not just because of the patents. Well, all right, the reason we got in touch with the tech transfer office was because of the patents and the license.
What did you enjoy the most about using the tech transfer office?
Well, I was thinking about that question when I saw it, and there's the interpersonal relations that we developed with them, and then there's also the quality of the IP that we were able to get access to. So, I enjoyed the fact that we got patents that saved us a lot of time. Well, they were, accommodating and reasonable, and they seem to recognize that a patent that doesn't turn into a product is not terribly interesting. So they were actually motivated to, what can we do to be reasonable here to make sure that this thing gets out into the world.
Can you give us a quick explanation of what your company is and what made you interested in that technology as well?
Yeah, right, super. It's, and it's not like I studied acoustics, okay? I'm not a mechanical engineer. I'm very comfortable with signal processing, digital signal processing and algorithms, but I'm not an acoustics person at all. When I joined this company, they were originally trying to build and commercialize a different product for use in the NICU, neonatal intensive care unit. And that's fine, but I was asked to go find another technology, because you don't want to have just one. And so one of our investors actually came to us and said, "Hey, I was at this conference the other night, and I saw something on active noise control and incubators are like babies, and you're trying to build a product for babies. So I thought maybe, babies, you should check these people out." So this was Northern Illinois University. So I went out and visited with those folks and negotiated a license for their technology too. And then we ran into this issue with wanting to get to Scott's patents also. So it's not like, I grew up with a burning desire to solve the problem of noise in the NICU. But pretty quickly, I went to, there's a conference, medical conference that's focused actually exclusively on the environment in the NICU and its effect on the development of babies. And so I talked to a bunch of people there, the clinicians, to say, you guys worried about noise? Is this a problem? And yeah, there was a real unmet need. So that's, you will never learn anything about your market. You'll never learn anything about your customers from the comfort of your office. The only way to do that is to go out and talk to them. So you go to a couple of trade shows, you got that, and then I got some introductions to some people. Scott introduced me. That's right. He introduced me to a guy that had been a graduate student that was studying, he was getting a postdoc at Brigham Young, not Brigham Young, at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. And so I got invited out there and had a chance to talk to the NICU staff there and got this all confirmed that, yeah, this is a real big problem. Anything you guys could do to help us solve that would be useful. So that's how we got interested in this. It was, you can't help but find problems in hospitals that need to be solved. There's no end to problems that need to be solved, and engineers need to solve them.
What happened after the funding came through? Like, what were the processes of, taking the technology and then turning it into a company, and how the growth came from there?
Yeah, growth is probably not the right word to use, because growth, I think of growth as it relates to sales, and the value of the company has grown. How about that?
Thank you.
That's the way to phrase it. The value of the company has grown, but we haven't grown sales. So not sure really how to answer that. I mean, at one level, it's just sort of, engineering development. Okay, so, we started with a bunch of bare circuit boards on a table with a whole bunch of wires, and tried to do a proof of concept. And then once we figured out, how, the core parts of the algorithm, again, Scott was critical in our ability to develop the algorithm, and the algorithm is at the core of the product. Should I describe briefly what the product is? I mean, or do you folks know that from looking? Okay, so it's a device that, I don't have a picture of it here. It's a device that sits inside of an infant incubator. It's got 2 speakers inside of the incubator and a microphone array, a little cube that sits by the baby's head, and then a microphone outside, and a DSP, a computer box that sits outside of the incubator also. One of the components one of the critical aspects of this is being able to build something that doesn't interfere with the way that the nurses are used to dealing with the patients. You can't get in their way. You can't make things harder for them. Okay, so, at that point, once we proved that it would work roughly, then it was a matter of, circuit board design, figuring out design for manufacturability so that, you didn't design something that would be too expensive to build. We had to contact a contract manufacturer and work with them to get the first ones built, the first 10 units built. We worked with Children's Hospital here in San Antonio, Children's Hospital of San Antonio. So they provided us access to their neonatal intensive care unit simulator. So it's a hospital room, you know what I mean, a room in a hospital that had ventilators and incubators and patient monitors, and they just gave us access to that at no cost, because they just wanted to see things done. And so then it was lots and lots of testing. Can you see the notebooks over here? So this is our quality system. If you're building a medical device, you have to comply with FDA's requirements about having a quality system. A quality system is your policies and your procedures for ensuring that the thing that you build is what the thing that you ended up building is what you thought you were going to build, and that when you test it, that you know that it's working. It's being used on patients, so you got to be super careful about that. Anyway, I think any legal industry that you're in the U.S., there's a regulatory component to that. So then it was a matter of finding the right regulatory person to help us with this, and then to find a regulatory consultant to help us with our actual FDA submission. And I've left out the marketing part. We did a very interesting part of this, of the development of this, was trying to figure out how much to charge for it and who was the actual buyer. So the nurse that uses it is not the buyer. The buyer might be the medical director, but it's most likely, say, the value analysis team at the hospital. But the people, it's kind of the dog food principle. The people that use the product are not the ones that buy the product. So, we had to come up with a marketing approach to one, a marketing approach to the other, and then asking people, you don't simply ask somebody, how much would you like to pay for this? You've got to figure out how much it's worth to them so that they feel that they're getting value for the money that they're putting out. And that was a pretty interesting study that we did. So the marketing component to this. And then the other part is, it's boring, but it's all what's called G&A, General and Administration. So, you have to incorporate, you have to have bylaws, you have to have a corporate attorney. You're taking money in and issuing shares of stock, so there are laws that you have to comply with for that. It's not the most interesting part of the job. The technology is, right, and helping the clinicians and getting in and out of the hospital. That's the fun part, but all of that background stuff has to be done too. I really don't like, revving an engineering drawing, okay? And I'm going from version C to version D, and so I've got to rev the drawing, and then I have to note that I've revved it. And my wife, fortunately, had done that for her job at one point, so she's been enormously helpful in keeping our books tidy without pay.
Nice. So going off of that, we know that to get your product FDA approved, it takes quite a bit of time. So how did you do it?
Boy, that's a great question. First of all, in medical devices, it's called you're cleared, you're not approved. If it's a drug with the FDA, then you're approved. So we are a cleared device. How did we get that done? My goodness gracious. And I noted in your questions here about, how did you do it so fast? It's so funny because I never would have thought, oh, we did it fast. The most important thing, so we had one all right, a couple of things. We had one consultant, okay, that was doing a fine job, I guess. But there was a form, there was an application we had to submit to the FDA, okay? It's called the 513G. That's not important, but we're proposing that you should classify our device like this. And she and I wrote that document together. We submitted it, and I remember seeing her at the airport in Milwaukee. Doesn't matter. And she said, "I thought that one went well. I've never written one of those before, so I thought we did okay." And I thought, what, you've never done one before? First of all, if you're a consultant, never, ever admit that you've never done one before, because I just hate for you to learn how to do it. And it didn't turn out all that well because we didn't get the classification we wanted. So I fired that consultant because we need a better one. And then by happenstance, I was in Houston at a conference, and somebody gave a presentation about the company that they have, and they seemed like they were a lot more on top of things. And then they said, oh, and by the way, we also can provide this funding for you from the FDA to defray a lot of your costs. It was something like $20,000 a year for a few years of grant money from the FDA. God bless them. So we got a good consultant. So that's a critical part of this thing, and my goodness, they were fantastic to work with. And then the other thing that we did was we took advantage of a program that the FDA has, pre-submission meetings. So rather than submitting your application and hoping for the best, you meet with them a bunch of times to say, we're thinking about doing it this way. We're thinking about testing like that. You guys agree or disagree? Okay, that's fine, but do 3 times as much as you said you were going to do. Okay, at least you know when you're going in. And the first time we visited them, coincidentally, was during the last government shutdown. So they were all there and working without pay. And so they kind of had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder attitude. And I don't blame them at all for that. So we did a bunch of pre-submission meetings, maybe 3, 1 in person, 2 over the phone. And that was absolutely invaluable. and getting our ducks in a row before we made our submission. They put us on a more arduous path. So there's what they determined was with that 513G that we were an absolutely brand new device, but we were less risky than if you were an implantable. And so, but we were brand new, so we couldn't say we were substantially equivalent to somebody else. Since we were brand new, they require, and since we're going on to little tiny babies, since our product is involved in sick babies, they put us through a really arduous pathway called a de novo pathway, and it just requires a lot more testing and a lot more rigor. The pathway, for what it's worth, the time that they have to work on it is 6 months, but they can stop their clock whenever they ask you another set of questions. That makes sense. So we submit it on whatever day. They got a 6-month clock going. But if they say, wait a minute, you need to do all this other stuff, the clock stops and it's back in our court and we work on it. And so start to finish, from the time that we submitted, not the time that we first met with them, the time that we submitted to the time that we were cleared, was 9 months. So, that was a big deal. And it was, we hit their 6-month window down to the last day. It was a Friday afternoon. And they, they're in Washington, they're in Bethesda, Maryland. So at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 18th of June, we're thinking, okay, is this it? Did we get it? Did we get it? Did we get it? And didn't hear anything, and we're texting each other. And so my wife and I was like, I can't take it. So we go out and we just buy a pile of Indian food and bring it back to the house, and I'm just going to eat and not worry about it. And when we got back, I got a text message from the woman that runs that consulting group saying, check your email. And I figured that's it. So yeah, we got it that day. There's the other thing I'd say about the FDA or any other industry is that any industry that you're in, like I said, there's going to be a regulator that's involved in it, and there should be a healthy tension between the regulator and the regulated, and everybody. It's common to complain about government regulation, but I want to say that without the FDA, as a society, we are totally screwed. You don't think anything about going to the store and buying a bottle of ibuprofen and taking it. If you had to have blood work done, you go to an urgent care clinic and have your blood work and not worry about, are these folks doing it right? And so I want to speak up in favor of government regulation.
That's awesome, and it is pretty important for that, and it's cool to see that whole process of how much it takes and the length of it all. So it's cool to see the details in that. And our next question.
Yeah.
Our next question, I know you mentioned a little bit about marketing your product and stuff, but just to go into a little bit more detail, who markets your product and what has been the best way to market your product? So
when you say market the product, you're talking about how do we promote it? How do we promote it? Well, we don't yet for a couple of reasons. One is until you're FDA cleared, you kind of absolutely can't market your product. You can't promote it for sale. You can't take an order on it. You have to be very careful when you're doing a pricing study because you have to be able to do a pricing study, but you can't say, hey, we'd like to offer this to you, or if I sold it to you for that much, you have to be very careful about that. So, our marketing was more on market research so what I would call upstream marketing rather than downstream marketing. Having said that, we worked with an advertising agency through some of that government grant money that we had. And, we got, something we could hand out at the trade shows, this little, be quiet thing that you put on your hotel room door with the terribly cute baby on the front. Do not disturb. Isn't that nice? But I think what you're talking about is really the promotion of the product. So with medical products, I think the most useful promotional tool, marketing tool, is peer review. Peer review articles and peer communication, rather than, I mean, this is nice, but anyway, so we generated 2 peer review articles, and the second one was, in a nice pediatric publication. Scott was one of the authors on the paper. The professor from UT Austin was also on it, and then we had a very important neonatologist as a senior author on the paper. And I think that reprint is going to be, for launch, the single most important aspect of the product promotion. Peer review articles saying it attenuates noise inside of an infant incubator. Beyond that, there's going to have to be, somebody's going to have a sales force and a product manager and a clinical specialist and a service team in order to craft the narrative. The product manager has got to craft the narrative. This is why you want this. Look at the flow of how the patient weight gain is related to the length of stay. Length of stay, if you have Medicaid dollars, you're given X amount of dollars to take care of a baby, and good luck. If you get the baby out on time and everything worked out, then you didn't lose money. And if it takes longer than you think it should take, then you do lose money. So you craft the narrative that says quiet is good for sleep, sleep is good for weight gain. If they're not gaining weight, they're not thriving, and you can't release them from the hospital until they thrive. So somebody's going to have to figure out how to do that, but that's a whole different activity, and it's you have to build up a staff for that. It's marketing is not as easy as it looks. Is somebody there interested in marketing?
I'm interested in marketing.
Yeah, right. It's so interesting. It's so fascinating. There's so much leverage that you can get out of marketing. I mean, it takes years to build the product, but if you have the right message, you can do it. It's more efficient, I think. You draft a message, you come up with promotional material, you put it in an envelope along with your peer review article, and you can do a lot of good with that. Anyway, marketing is a really interesting subject. We could go on about that. What else do we have?
Yeah, that's really cool.
So we just have one last question for you.
Yeah.
So just wondering, what kind of advice would you give someone who's starting to work with the tech transfer office?
And starting to work with the tech transfer office so this sort of plays into my question to you folks, okay, is how does it work there? The tech transfer office has technology, you've got patents. If you guys come up with something, then you could write your own patent on that. And then would you transfer it from the university to a standalone company? So how does that work with you? Because that'll, I think, inform the answer about, how do students, and for that matter, professors at BYU interact with the tech transfer office? What's the purpose of it for you? I know what it is for me.
Yeah, I can answer that one.
Yeah.
So you were asking about at the beginning about entrepreneurship and how no one was doing it earlier. So now it's we have a major dedicated to it. It's called entrepreneurship management, and so that's in the business school. So that's why business majors we're working with them. So it's a little bit shifted because now it's like anyone can start a business. So it's more focused on how to run the business rather than designing the product to run the business. So since a lot of people are more so looking at like the managerial side and like starting the business, they come to the TTO and they get the product they need so that they can go and start a business. And some will have ideas too, and they can start their businesses from that. But yeah.
So in other words, you're saying that there's the catalog of technologies that are hopefully patent protected. And so somebody might walk in and say, I'd like to start a business. What do you got? Or do they say, they'd like to start a business roughly in the field of water purification? What do you have? I suppose that there are departments at BYU that are better known than others. There's a specialty, I'm sure, there. So how is it that somebody goes in and, I mean, you don't go in and say, what do you got? What's the interaction? What's the back and forth with between the student and the tech transfer office?
Yeah, so on our website, you can look at all of the different technologies that we have. So normally we kind of recommend to the person that they go and look online and kind of find some that they're interested in, and then they can go in and talk to kind of like the head of the department who's like really good with all of this type of stuff, and he can kind of help them figure out which one would work well. They specifically approve certain ones that they think will have the highest chance of succeeding. So the ones that they can even in the first place are already like vetted to succeed.
Boy, and when that happens, is first of all, does the technology tend to come from the professors, or does it equally come from the professors and the students?
More professors.
Okay, and maybe the postdoc or the graduate student that's working in the lab with the professor. Okay. So I guess one thing would be, is the professor likely to be involved in the business? The professor, the named inventor.
I'm not sure exactly what it is, but the professor will work with the team and they'll also get a certain amount of equity or profit.
Right.
I'm not sure the specific percentages though.
Right, okay.
But I think they have mostly control over how much they want to be involved with it. Like
Yeah.
some will kind of more so sign it off and some will be involved in the process.
Good. Because some don't have any interest in it.
Yeah.
Right. It takes them away from research, potentially. Boy, I'm hesitant to give advice to people that I don't know. I'll say that the challenge is, first of all, is don't underestimate the challenge of starting a business. Starting a medical device business is not as easy as it looks. I don't know if it looks easy. Especially medical, because the stakes are so high and the regulatory scrutiny is so intense. But I said water purification, and you know what? That's probably got equal scrutiny on it too, right? You don't want to get that wrong. I think that finding somebody that's been in business, whether they've started a company or whether they've just been in business, but that has seen a lot, would make a really good partner. When somebody goes to approach the TTO to say, I'd like to license, you form a company and that company license it from the TTO. But having somebody that's been around and has done some of this, I think would be a useful partner. And I'm hesitating in saying this because I don't want to come across as you kids, you don't know anything yet. That's not it. But there's so many aspects of running a business. Like we were just talking about, there's the corporate governance, being aware that you need director and officers insurance so that if you screw up on something, you won't and you're sued, there's insurance to cover that. Okay, well, I didn't know that. As well as the technology aspect of it, as well as how are we going to do our pricing studies. There's just so much that you've got to get the right blend of talent in the team that's going in there to do it. And hopefully one old person. I think of it as a bathtub clerk. who can be involved in a startup, right? And you have folks that are fresh out of college, right? And then you have people that already have all of their retirement savings taken care of. And then in the middle, you have, I got 3 kids in daycare and I've just started my 401k and I'm going to take a job, that might run out of money in 6 months. I can't do that. So it tends to be young people and old people that do this. So maybe finding an old person would be useful too. I have a friend who's a retired county sheriff. Before he retired, I was walking through the airport in Milwaukee where he worked, and he'd been recently assigned to work his duties at the airport. And he, how's it going, Scott? And different Scott. And he said, how's that company of yours going? I said, it's going all right. He said, so it's good, it's solid? I said, no, we'd probably run out of money in 6 months if I can't find some more. And he said, I could never deal with that amount of anxiety or worry in my job. And I said, Scott, have you ever been shot at in your job? Have you ever had a high-speed chase at night? Yeah, I've done that. It's like, all right, well, there's the risk that I couldn't possibly tolerate. So it's finding the right people that are willing to start off their career with 5 years of failure.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Hutchinson, for your time, for answering our questions, and it's been really a pleasure to get to learn more about active noise control.
Hope I didn't take too much time. That was a lot of fun. Good luck to everybody.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, see y'all later.